Chosen ones, ignoring this prophetic date will cost you all. God said, January. Ladies and gentlemen, chosen ones, hear this with clarity, sobriety, and spiritual maturity. There are moments in life when God speaks gently, inviting us to grow. And then there are moments when God speaks precisely, placing his finger on a specific time and saying, pay attention, this matters. This is not a message built on emotion, hype, or fear. This is a message built on timing. And timing, when it comes from God, is never accidental. We live in an age where people believe they can delay obedience and still expect divine outcomes. We have grown comfortable treating warnings as suggestions and instructions as optional. But heaven does not function on convenience, it functions on order. When God assigns a moment, it is because something is shifting, something is being weighed, and something is being decided. This is why this message is not for everyone. It is not for the casual listener, the spiritually distracted, or the emotionally reactive. This message is for those who know, deep within their spirit, that they are standing at the edge of a transition. You can feel it. Things no longer fit the way they used to. Conversations feel heavy. Certain relationships feel strained. Old patterns are losing their grip, yet the next season has not fully revealed itself. That uncomfortable space is not confusion, it is preparation. Ladies and gentlemen, history shows us that God has always marked time when he was about to move decisively. There were days when the door of the ark remained open, and there was a day when it shut. There were nights when Israel waited, and a specific night when deliverance came. These were not random moments, they were appointed ones, and those who were attentive stepped forward, while those who hesitated were left wondering what went wrong. Today, we are confronting such a moment again. Not symbolically, not metaphorically, but practically. There are dates being highlighted, not to create fear, but to demand focus. When God draws attention to a specific time, it means alignment is required. Something must be laid down, something must be recognized, and something must be obeyed. Many people pray for change but resist instruction. They want the outcome without the posture, they want the promise without the process. Yet every divine shift begins with a decision to listen, to pause, to withdraw from noise, and to honor what God is asking now, not later. This introduction is not meant to alarm you, it is meant to awaken you. Because what you do with this message will quietly determine what you experience next. Not everything God says comes again. Some instructions are repeated, others are time bound. And wisdom is knowing the difference. So as we move forward, do not listen casually. Do not listen defensively. Listen as someone who understands that when God speaks about timing, he is offering protection, positioning, and preparation all at once. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not just a word, it is a moment. God does not only move in seasons, he moves in appointments. And this is where many people misunderstand how divine timing works. Seasons are broad, appointments are precise. Seasons can stretch, but appointments require attention at a specific moment. When God sets a date, he is not being symbolic, poetic, or optional. He is being exact. Throughout spiritual history, whenever God intended to shift destiny, he marked time. Not because he needed a calendar, but because we do. Time is the language through which God trains obedience. When heaven highlights a day, it is because something unseen is being arranged, something is being weighed, and something is being released or withheld based on response. An appointed time is not about activity, it is about availability. God is not asking you to perform, impress, or announce. He is asking you to be present, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally. The tragedy is that many people are physically alive but spiritually absent when God speaks most clearly. They are busy when they should be still. They are loud when they should be listening. They are explaining when they should be obeying. When God sets a date, he is saying, I will meet you here. Will you show up? Heaven always announces before it acts. God never interrupts a life without first issuing instruction. And instruction ignored does not cancel God's plan. It cancels your placement within it. God's will continues, but participation is conditional. There are moments when God allows flexibility, and then there are moments when flexibility becomes disobedience. Appointed times fall into the second category. They are not negotiable. They are not customizable. They are not for interpretation. They are for alignment. Many people believe missing an appointed time means God abandons them. That is not true. God does not abandon, but He advances. And those who are not aligned feel as though God has gone silent, when in reality He has moved ahead. This is why ignoring divine timing creates confusion. The prayers feel unanswered, the direction feels unclear, the peace feels absent, not because God is withholding, but because the individual is out of sync. Alignment is not about belief, it is about obedience. You can believe deeply and still miss timing. Faith does not override instruction. In fact, true faith expresses itself through obedience, especially when the instruction feels inconvenient, unclear, or uncomfortable. When God sets a date, He is often demanding separation from distraction, separation from noise, separation from unnecessary people, conversations, and environments. This is because clarity requires space, and space requires discipline. Discipline is not punishment, it is protection. God sets appointed times when the next season carries risk if entered unprepared. Silence before promotion is not rejection, it is shielding. Withdrawal before acceleration is not delay, it is strategy. These moments feel subtle to the untrained eye. Nothing dramatic may happen externally. No thunder, no announcement, no obvious sign, but internally, something begins to rearrange. Desires shift, tolerance decreases, discernment sharpens, old attachments start to feel heavy. This is the evidence of divine alignment taking place. Those who ignore appointed times often do so because they underestimate stillness. They believe God only moves through action. But many of God's greatest works begin in silence. Stillness is not inactivity, it is receptivity. God speaks clearest when you stop trying to control outcomes. An appointed time is when God demands attention over ambition. Many people are so focused on what they want next that they miss what God is saying now. They rush ahead, assuming momentum is spiritual confirmation, but speed without instruction leads to exhaustion, confusion, and misalignment. God is not impressed by movement, He is honored by obedience. When God highlights a date, He is also testing priority. What will you cancel? What will you pause? What will you refuse to engage with? Because obedience matters more than convenience. These choices reveal where authority truly lies in your life. Every appointed time carries a cost. The cost is not money, it is access. You must temporarily restrict access to things that dilute sensitivity: excess talking, excess scrolling, excess explaining, excess emotional engagement. These dull discernment. Sensitivity is fragile, and God protects sensitive instruments by removing them from chaotic environments. This is why many people miss divine appointments. They treat sacred moments like ordinary days. They assume tomorrow will bring another opportunity. But some doors are time locked. They open only when obedience meets timing. When God set dates in the past, those who honored them moved forward with clarity and authority. Those who ignored them were left to struggle, not because God was cruel, but because timing had passed. God values readiness more than enthusiasm. An appointed time is also when God recalibrates identity. During these moments, He strips away false confidence, borrowed beliefs, and external validation. He reminds you who you are without applause, without affirmation, without audience. This grounding is essential before elevation. Elevation without grounding creates collapse. God would rather slow you down than watch you destroy what He intends to give you. Those who recognize appointed times do not panic. They pause. They do not announce. They observe. They do not react. They reflect. They understand that divine instruction often comes quietly because it is meant to be protected. Noise attracts interference. Silence attracts clarity. Ignoring an appointed time does not bring immediate consequence. That is what makes it dangerous. The impact shows up later, in confusion, in misconnections, in forced decisions, in unnecessary struggle. People often say, "I don't know where things went wrong," not realizing the misstep occurred during a moment they dismissed as ordinary. But nothing is ordinary when God is speaking. An appointed time is God's way of saying, "I am about to change something." Do not treat this lightly. It is an invitation to partner with heaven in precision, not passion. Precision requires restraint. It requires humility. It requires trust. Those who honor divine timing don't rush into the future. They arrive prepared. They don't force doors, they recognize the ones already opening. They don't beg for clarity. They receive it naturally because alignment creates understanding. God sets dates when heaven demands attention. Not fear, not anxiety, not obsession, but reverence. Reverence is quiet obedience. Reverence is respectful stillness. Reverence is choosing alignment over urgency, and those who learn to honor appointed times discover that life begins to flow with less resistance. Not because challenges disappear, but because timing supports them. Doors open with ease. Decisions carry peace. Movement feels guided rather than forced. This is the power of recognizing when God sets a date. It is not about the date itself, it is about the response. Heaven always moves on schedule. The question is whether you are aligned when it does. 30:31. Ignoring divine instruction does not remove God from your life, but it removes you from position. This is a truth many struggle to accept because it confronts a comfortable belief that sincerity can substitute for obedience. It cannot. Good intentions do not override divine order. When God speaks and a person delays, rationalizes, or dismisses, heaven does not argue. It simply moves forward. Positioning is everything in the spiritual realm. Blessings are not random, they are located. Favor flows through alignment, not desire. You can love God deeply and still stand in the wrong place at the wrong time. And when that happens, the consequences are subtle but severe. Ignoring a divine window does not result in immediate collapse. Life continues. You wake up, you function, you still pray. That is why many people assume nothing happened. But internally, something shifted. Momentum slowed. Clarity faded. Opportunities became complicated. What once felt guided now feels forced. That is the cost of missing timing. God's silence after ignored instruction is not abandonment. It is distance created by misalignment. God does not stop speaking, he stops repeating. He expects maturity, not constant reminders. Repetition is mercy, but timing is responsibility. Many people think consequences always arrive dramatically. In truth, the most dangerous consequences arrive quietly. They show up as confusion instead of chaos, delay instead of disaster, frustration instead of failure. And because nothing bad seems to happen immediately, the lesson is missed. But delay is expensive. Delay drains energy. Delay exhausts faith. Delay forces you to work harder for what alignment would have brought effortlessly. You begin striving where you once flowed. You explain where you once rested. You push where you once followed. This is not punishment, it is cause and effect. Divine windows exist because certain outcomes require a specific internal state. Miss the window, and the internal state is never fully formed. You may still receive parts of the promise, but without fullness, without ease, without confirmation. God cares more about who you become than what you receive, and divine timing is designed to shape identity. When you ignore timing, you bypass formation. You receive without readiness, and that creates instability. Many breakdowns are not caused by lack of faith, they are caused by premature access. This is why God sometimes allows you to feel loss when instruction is ignored, not because he wants to harm you, but because loss exposes misalignment. Pain becomes a teacher when obedience was dismissed. People often say, I prayed, but nothing changed. What they rarely ask is, what instruction did I ignore? Prayer does not cancel disobedience. Prayer without alignment becomes noise. When God gives a warning, it is an act of protection. Warnings are not threats, they are guardrails. Ignoring them does not remove danger, it removes protection. Divine windows often require restraint. They ask you to pause when everything in you wants to move. They ask you to be silent when you want to explain. They ask you to withdraw when you want validation. Ignoring that restraint exposes you to interference. Interference is subtle. Wrong conversations, wrong advice, wrong emotional decisions, wrong timing. And once interference enters, clarity becomes fragmented. God is precise because destiny is fragile. Missing a divine window often leads to unnecessary cycles. You repeat lessons you were meant to pass once. You revisit environments you were meant to outgrow. You face resistance where there should have been release. And people call this testing, not realizing it is repetition caused by missed instruction. God does not enjoy repeating lessons. He prefers progress. But progress requires responsiveness. When responsiveness is absent, repetition becomes necessary. There are moments when God says, wait, and there are moments when God says, move. Confusing the two is costly. Waiting when God says move creates stagnation. Moving when God says wait creates loss. Ignoring divine timing creates self-generated struggle. You begin carrying burdens that were never assigned to you. You make decisions under pressure instead of peace. You chase clarity instead of receiving it. Peace is the indicator of alignment. Anxiety is often the signal of misplacement. Many people mistake emotional urgency for divine urgency. But God is never frantic. His instructions carry calm authority. When you feel rushed, pressured, or panicked, that is not divine urgency. That is internal imbalance. Ignoring divine instruction also affects discernment. The voice of God becomes harder to distinguish because sensitivity dulls when obedience is delayed. This is not because God speaks less, but because the heart becomes noisier. Obedience sharpens hearing. Delay dulls it. When God speaks and you respond promptly, confidence grows. When you delay, doubt increases. Doubt then masquerades as wisdom, and hesitation disguises itself as discernment. But true discernment produces clarity, not confusion. One of the greatest costs of ignoring divine windows is misplaced effort. You invest energy into things that will not last. You nurture relationships that will not follow you. You build structures that will not support the next season. And later, when God redirects you, it feels like loss. But it is actually course correction. Correction is always more painful than obedience. God gives warnings because he sees outcomes you cannot. He sees consequences hidden in future moments. Ignoring his foresight is not independence, it is vulnerability. Some do. RS only open once. Not because God is unfair, but because timing creates readiness on both sides. Miss the timing and the alignment dissolves. What was once possible becomes complicated or unreachable. This is why Scripture repeatedly emphasizes hearing today, not tomorrow, not later, today, because responsiveness is time sensitive. God's grace does not eliminate structure. Grace gives access to instruction. Obedience gives access to outcome. When people ignore divine timing, they often blame others for the results. They blame opposition, circumstances, or spiritual attack. But many struggles are not attacks, they are echoes of ignored instruction. God does not need to oppose you to slow you down. He simply removes momentum. Momentum is a gift of alignment. When alignment is lost, everything feels heavier. Decisions take longer, progress feels resistant, joy becomes conditional, and the soul grows tired, not from work but from misdirection. Ignoring divine windows also affects influence. Authority flows from obedience. When obedience weakens, authority diminishes. You may still speak, but impact lessens. You may still lead, but confidence erodes. People sense alignment before they hear words. God is merciful, but mercy does not erase timing. He can restore years, but restoration is never cheaper than obedience would have been. Restoration requires healing, rebuilding, and recalibration. Obedience requires only surrender. This is why divine warnings matter. They are not meant to frighten you, they are meant to position you. Position determines outcome more than effort ever will. Missing timing does not mean destiny is cancelled, but it often means destiny is dealer, yet diluted or redirected, and some redirections are permanent. God speaks clearly because clarity is kindness. Ignoring clarity invites complexity. Divine windows are moments when heaven leans in and says, choose alignment now so you don't struggle later. Those who listen move forward with peace. Those who delay carry unnecessary weight. God does not ask for perfection, he asks for response. And the cost of ignoring divine timing is not losing God. It is losing the advantage of being exactly where He intended you to be, exactly when He intended you to be there. January 29th, 30th, and 31st are not random markers on a calendar. They function as a line of distinction. These days are not about punishment or fear, they are about selection. In every major movement of God, there comes a moment when separation happens quietly, without announcement and without explanation. Those who are attentive cross over. Those who are distracted remain where they are, often unaware that anything even occurred. Separation is one of the most misunderstood acts of God. Many assume separation means rejection. In truth, separation is preparation. God separates before He entrusts. He isolates before He elevates. He narrows before He expands. And these dates serve that exact purpose. During separation periods, God does not pull people apart violently. He does it subtly. Interest fades. Conversations feel unnecessary. Environments feel heavy. Certain voices lose influence. This is not confusion. It is discernment awakening. The Spirit begins to reject what the future cannot carry. January 29 to 31 represents a filtering window. Not everyone who started the journey with you is meant to continue. Not every habit that once sustained you can survive where you're going. These days expose attachments that no longer serve alignment. Many people resist separation because they fear loss. But loss is not always subtraction. Sometimes it is release. God removes weight so speed can increase. He removes noise so clarity can emerge. He removes familiarity so faith can deepen. Selection does not mean superiority, it means responsibility. Those who pass through this window are not chosen because they are better, but because they are willing to listen. Responsiveness, not perfection, is the qualifier. These days highlight a difference between the attentive and the comfortable. Comfort dulls urgency. Familiarity breeds carelessness. And when God calls for precision, casualness becomes costly. During January 29 to 31, many will feel an internal tension. Part of them will want to engage as usual. Another part will feel urged to pull back. That tension is the signal. The flesh resists separation, but the spirit recognizes necessity. God often separates quietly because publicity invites interference. What He is doing in you during these days must be protected. Announcements dilute impact. Explanation invites resistance. Silence preserves momentum. Selection moments are rarely dramatic. There is no loud confirmation, no external validation, just an inner knowing that something has shifted. Those who require external signs often miss internal transitions. Separation also reveals true alignment. When pressure increases, only what is authentic remains. Performative faith collapses under stillness. Borrowed beliefs dissolve when the crowd disappears. What's left is what's real. January 29 to 31 exposes motivations. Are you driven by obedience or recognition, by instruction or impulse, by alignment or attachment? These questions surface not through interrogation, but through discomfort. God uses discomfort as a compass. During selection period, some relationships will strain, not because of conflict, but because of difference in frequency. When one person aligns and another resists, distance naturally forms. This is not betrayal, it is divergence. Trying to force unity during divine separation only creates damage. God never asks you to drag others through doors they refuse to approach. Each person must respond individually. These dates also mark a threshold. Thresholds are not places you linger, they are places you pass through. Hesitation here creates stagnation. Indecision here breeds regret. God is not asking for long-term commitments during these days. He is asking for short-term obedience. What you do in a brief window can affect a long season. Selection is not about exclusion, it is about readiness. Some are not excluded forever, they are simply unprepared now. But readiness is time-sensitive. During January 29 to 31, God is also stripping away false alliances. These are connections formed out of convenience, fear, or nostalgia rather than purpose. Such alliances cannot survive elevation. Elevation requires solitude first. Many people fear being alone, not realizing that loneliness is different from isolation by God. God's isolation is purposeful. It strengthens identity. It refines hearing. It restores direction. Isolation by God feels calm, not chaotic. During these days, external validation will decrease. Praise will feel distant. Affirmation may go silent. This is intentional. God is recentering authority internally, so you no longer depend on others to confirm what He has already said. Those who rely on constant affirmation struggle during separation. Those who trust instruction thrive. Selecti on also brings exposure, not public exposure, but self exposure. You become aware of patterns, compromises, and excuses you once ignored. This awareness is not condemnation, it is clarity. Clarity often arrives before change. God uses these days to recalibrate identity. You stop introducing yourself by roles, labels, or achievements. You begin recognizing yourself by alignment. This shift is subtle but powerful. Those who cross this window will notice that certain temptations lose power, certain desires dissolve, certain fears weaken. This is not discipline, it is transformation. Transformation happens when attachment breaks. Not everyone will recognize the significance of these days. Many will carry on as usual. That does not make them wrong. It simply places them outside this specific movement. God works in layers, not lines. Selection is always happening somewhere. Those who respond during January 29 to 31 will feel a quiet strengthening afterward. Not excitement, stability, not urgency, assurance, not noise, peace. Peace is the confirmation of alignment. Trying to explain what happened during these days will feel difficult. Language will fail because the shift was internal, not external. This is normal. Divine work often resists articulation. God values discretion. Selection also determines access to ideas, clarity, strategy, and timing. Access to conversations you couldn't enter before. Access to opportunities that require maturity. Access is granted through alignment, not ambition. Those who miss this window may still succeed, but with more resistance, more trial and error, more uncertainty, not because God withholds, but because precision was bypassed. Precision simplifies life. January 29 to 30. 1 acts as a dividing line between preparation and execution. Those who respond enter clarity. Those who delay remain in processing. Processing is necessary, but it is not meant to be permanent. God separates because destiny requires focus. Focus cannot exist where distraction is tolerated. Separation sharpens focus by removing options. Fewer options produce clearer decisions. These days are not about doing something extraordinary. They are about doing something intentional. Choosing stillness, choosing restraint, choosing obedience without applause. Those choices may feel small, but they are decisive. God does not measure significance by visibility. He measures it by alignment. The separation and selection taking place during January 29 to 31 is not meant to elevate ego. It is meant to establish foundation. Foundations are laid quietly beneath the surface before anything visible is built. Those who honor these days will not immediately see dramatic changes, but they will notice fewer internal battles, clearer priorities, and stronger discernment. And that is how selection reveals itself, not through announcement, but through peaceful authority. This is what it means when God marks days as separation and selection. It is not about who is left behind. It is about who is ready to move forward without carrying what no longer belongs in the next season. Silence is not absence, it is instruction. When God calls for stillness, He is not withdrawing, He is directing. Yet this is one of the hardest disciplines for the chosen ones to obey, because stillness confronts urgency and silence exposes attachment. Withdrawal feels uncomfortable. Because it removes the noise that once distracted us from hearing clearly. God often requires silence before He releases movement, not because He enjoys withholding, but because noise interferes with precision. The more significant the next assignment, the more deliberate the stillness that precedes it. Withdrawal is not isolation driven by fear or exhaustion. It is intentional separation for alignment. There is a difference between hiding and being hidden by God. Hiding is driven by insecurity. Being hidden is driven by purpose. During moments of divine instruction, God pulls his people out of circulation, not permanently, but strategically. He reduces access so clarity can increase. He quiets external voices so his voice can be distinguished. Silence is a spiritual discipline that sharpens discernment. Every unnecessary conversation drains sensitivity. Every explanation given prematurely leaks authority. God does not reveal his next move to those who talk through every impulse. Those who speak constantly often hear least. When God requires stillness, it is not because he has nothing to say, it is because he is about to say something precise. Precision demands attention. Attention requires quiet. Many people misunderstand withdrawal and assume something is wrong. They feel less motivated to engage socially, less interested in entertainment, less responsive to constant communication. This is not depression, it is transition. Transition always involves detachment. God demands silence not only in speech but in reaction. Reacting prematurely creates consequences. Silence allows revelation to finish forming before action begins. The need to explain is often rooted in fear of misunderstanding. But God never asks you to explain his instructions. He asks you to obey them. Explanation invites opinions. Opinions invite confusion. Stillness protects clarity. There are moments when God says, "Do not respond." Not because the situation does not matter, but because response would entangle you in something misaligned. Silence preserves energy and authority. Authority is not raised by volume, it is established through restraint. Withdrawal also reveals dependency. When you step back and feel anxious, it exposes reliance on affirmation, validation, or control. God allows that discomfort to surface so it can be healed. Stillness dismantles false confidence. God often withdraws you from environments you once thrived in because the version of you that fit there no longer exists. Forcing yourself to remain present in spaces meant for a previous season creates friction. Friction is a signal, not a failure. Silence is also the doorway to reception. You cannot receive while constantly transmitting. Many people talk themselves out of revelation because they never stop long enough to listen. Listening is not passive, it is active obedience. God speaks in layers, first through discomfort, then through intuition, then through clarity. Silence allows each layer to unfold without interruption. During periods of divine withdrawal, routines may change, sleep patterns shift, interests realign, prayer becomes simpler, language becomes minimal. These are signs of internal recalibration. God simplifies before he assigns. The requirement of stillness also protects you from premature exposure. What God is forming in you is not ready for scrutiny. Public Cess invites judgment before strength is established. Strength grows best in quiet. Jesus himself withdrew often, not because he was weak, but because he was intentional. He understood that intimacy with God required space from constant demand. Demand drains discernment. Stillness also trains patience. Patience is not waiting without purpose, it is waiting with trust. Trust grows when you resist the urge to interfere with divine timing. Interference delays outcome. Withdrawal forces you to confront internal noise. Thoughts, fears, assumptions, and expectations surface. This is uncomfortable but necessary. God cleanses internally before he moves externally. External change without internal order creates instability. Silence also restores perspective. When you step back, you begin to see patterns you missed while engaged. You recognize cycles, triggers, and distractions. Awareness increases without effort. Awareness leads to wisdom. God often instructs stillness when decisions are near. Movement without clarity creates regret. Stillness allows conviction to replace confusion. Conviction carries peace. Confusion carries pressure. Those who resist silence often fear losing momentum, but momentum built without alignment collapses under weight. God would rather pause you than repair damage later. Pause is prevention. Withdrawal does not mean inactivity, it means intentional inactivity, choosing not to engage where engagement is unnecessary. It is disciplined restraint, not laziness. Restraint is power under control. Silence also strengthens identity. Without constant interaction, you stop defining yourself by response and reaction. You begin to recognize who you are apart from influence. Identity clarity precedes authority. When God requires stillness, it is often because something is about to end. Endings require space. Closure requires reflection. Without stillness, endings remain incomplete and resurface later. Incomplete endings create emotional loops. Silence gives God room to seal what he has already spoken. Many words are lost because they are never sealed by obedience. Obedience often looks like quiet agreement. Withdrawal also reveals what truly matters. When distractions fall away, priorities emerge. You see where energy should be invested and where it should be withdrawn. Energy is currency. God does not waste silence. Every quiet moment is formative. Every pause is shaping something unseen. Those who honor stillness emerge with clarity, stability, and authority. Those who resist it emerge tired, scattered, and unsure. Stillness is not the absence of movement, it is the preparation for precise movement. God demands silence, withdrawal, and stillness not to restrict you, but to protect you from misalignment. The more significant the assignment, the quieter the preparation. Those who learn to be still do not miss divine instruction. They recognize that silence is not emptiness. It is where God speaks most clearly, without competition, without interruption, and without confusion. What you do during critical moments determines more than your immediate outcome. It determines the direction of your next season. God does not judge seasons by length, he judges them by response. And when heaven highlights a narrow window of time, it is because decisions made there will echo far beyond those days. These 3 days are NOT about dramatic action, they are about decisive posture. Small choices made in moments of instruction often outweigh large efforts made later in frustration. Alignment is established quietly long before results become visible. During these days, God is observing responsiveness, not perfection, not emotional intensity, but willingness to listen and adjust. The next season is not unlocked by striving, it is unlocked by cooperation. Many people underestimate the power of short obedience. They assume only long-term consistency matters, but in the spiritual realm, brief moments of precise obedience can shift years of trajectory. Precision accelerates destiny. What you do during these days sets a tone. That tone determines what you will tolerate, what you will pursue, and what you will refuse in the coming season. Tone shapes discernment. Discernment shapes decision making. Decisions made without clarity produce consequences that clarity could have prevented. These days also establish boundaries. Boundaries are not walls, they are filters. They decide what enters your life and what remains outside. When boundaries are weak during instruction, chaos enters the next season. God uses critical windows to reset standards. What once felt acceptable begins to feel heavy. What once felt exciting begins to feel empty. This shift is not loss, it is refinement. Refinement precedes increase. During these days, you may feel the urge to simplify. Fewer conversations, fewer explanations, fewer commitments. This is not retreat, it is realignment. Simplification creates space for clarity to settle. Clarity requires margin. What you entertain during these days determines what follows. Why? You forward. Entertaining distraction invites confusion. Entertaining stillness invites understanding. God often withholds detail until obedience is shown. He does not reveal the entire map, only the next step. Those who demand full explanation delay movement. Trust is shown through response, not certainty. The next season will amplify whatever is unresolved now. Unresolved fear becomes hesitation. Unresolved pride becomes resistance. Unresolved attachment becomes obstruction. These days are an opportunity to release weight before momentum increases. Momentum multiplies what already exists. What you choose to ignore during this time will demand attention later, often at a higher cost. What you confront now loses power later. Early obedience reduces future struggle. God also uses these days to finalize direction. Direction is not about speed, it is about orientation. Facing the wrong direction while moving fast leads further away from destination. Orientation determines outcome. During this window, alignment feels more important than productivity. That is because productivity without direction is waste. God would rather slow you down than let you build in the wrong place. Wrong placement requires demolition. These days also expose priorities. When time feels weighted, what you choose to give attention to reveals what truly matters. God adjusts priority by applying pressure. Pressure clarifies value. What you honor during these days will honor you later. Honor here does not mean ceremony, it means respect. Respecting instruction, respecting timing, respecting boundaries. Disrespecting timing invites resistance. The next season will demand clarity, stamina, and company. Infidence. These are not acquired through effort, they are formed through obedience. Obedience builds internal strength quietly. Strength built quietly lasts longer. These days also shape expectation. Expectation influences interpretation. How you expect God to move affects how you recognize Him moving. Alignment corrects expectation. Correct expectation prevents disappointment. God does not always change circumstances during instruction. He often changes perception first. Changed perception transforms response. Response determines experience. What you choose to say during these days matters. Words spoken prematurely create obligations. Words withheld preserve flexibility. Silence is often the most faithful response. Faith does not always speak, it listens. The next season will expose whatever you have not surrendered. Surrender now prevents conflict later. Surrender is not loss, it is transfer of control. Control surrendered becomes peace. God also measures trust during these moments. Trust is revealed when obedience occurs without immediate reward. Those who trust God's timing do not demand reassurance. Reassurance follows obedience, not before. What you do in private during these days outweighs what you display publicly later. Public success is rooted in private alignment. Alignment is built unseen. The next season will require discernment to navigate opportunities. Discernment is sharpened through restraint now. Saying no during instruction enables confident yes later. Yes without discernment creates regret. These days also determine capacity. Capacity is not how much you can carry, it is how well you can carry it. Capacity grows when unnecessary weight is released, lightened loads travel farther. God is not rushing you, He is positioning you. Position determines access. Access determines outcome. Outcome begins with obedience. What you do during these days becomes a reference point. When future decisions arise, clarity will trace back to choices made here. Alignment creates memory, spiritual recall that guides future response. Memory reinforces direction. These days are a checkpoint, not a test. Checkpoints exist to ensure safe travel. Ignoring them does not stop the journey, it increases risk. Risk multiplies without alignment. God's instruction during these days is not dramatic because drama distracts from discipline. Discipline produces stability. Stability supports growth. Growth without stability collapses. The next season will reward those who honored instruction with ease. Ease does not mean absence of challenge, it means absence of resistance. Resistance is often self inflicted. What you do during these days determines whether you enter the next season striving or flowing. Striving exhausts, flow sustains. Sustained progress is born from alignment. God does not measure obedience by duration, but by timing. Timely obedience unlocks seasons that delayed obedience struggles to enter. These days matter because timing matters. Heaven responds to alignment, and alignment is established not through noise, not through effort, not through urgency, but through quiet, deliberate obedience during moments God has clearly marked. What you do now will shape what follows. Not loudly, not immediately, but decisively.